Okay, question number 12 says to factor out the opposite of the GCF. Okay, if I look at the numbers 2, 16, and 18, the GCF would be 2. I'm going to pull out a 2. Now if I look at the variables, I have an m to the fourth, an m squared, and an m. So the biggest I can pull out is just an m. Now if I look at n, I have n squared, and n squared. The most I can pull out from all three terms is an n. My GCF is 2mn, but it says to factor out the opposite of the GCF, so I'm going to factor out a negative 2mn. What will be remaining? If I pull out a 2 and an m, I have 3 left and an n. So all that's remaining, I pull out the negative as well. All that remains is an m cubed. Actually, before I do this, let me go pull out the negative on all of them first. If I pull out a negative, that's gone. If I pull out a negative, this becomes a minus. And if I pull out a negative, this becomes a plus. I'm going to do that first and take care of the signs. Okay, now let's go see what remains. I pulled out a 2. I pulled out an m, so that means that knocks that down to a 3. And I pulled out an n. So this first term, all that remains is m cubed. Then I have minus. If I pull out a 2, the 16 turns into a 2 times 8 is 16. If I pull out an m, that becomes a 1. I don't need to put a 1 up there because it's understood. If I pull out an n, this one becomes a 1 as well. So I have 8mn plus, if I pull out a 2, the 18 divided by 2 is a 9. I pull out an m, and I pull out an n, so that becomes a 1. So I have 9n remaining. So my answer is negative 2mn times the factor m cubed minus 8mn plus 9n. For number 13, factor out the GCF. Select prime if the polynomial cannot be factored. I want to call attention to, we have 2 things that we are subtracting. That term minus this term. In both terms, I see an r plus 2. I'm going to factor out r plus 2 from both terms. So what remains? Well, let's see. Let's do the same thing we did above. If r plus 2 is factored out of this term, I'm left with 10. Minus, if r plus 2 is factored out of that term, I'm left with a t. So my answer is r plus 2 times the factor 10 minus t. Number 14, factor out the GCF. Okay, again, I have 2 terms. This one plus this one. Do those 2 terms have something in common? Yes, they have the binomial x plus 2 in common. That's the GCF. If I factor that out, what remains? From this first term, if I factor out an x plus 2, 6x remains. Plus, from this factor, if I factor out an x plus 2, I have 3x squared. Okay, I'm going to question here, and I don't know the answer. Right now, the GCF was just an x plus 2. So I'm hoping this is what Connect Math wants. But I'm going to show you that if you had x plus 2 times 6x plus 3x squared, the second term, you can factor something else out. Okay, so I'm left with x plus 2. Now from these two terms here, I can factor out a 3x. And what will be left? If I factor, let me do this in orange. If I pull out an x and a 3, 3 goes into 6 2 times. So a 2 is left, plus factor out a 3, factor out an x, I'm left with x. So this is the answer if it wants it completely factored. It may be good with just factoring out the GCF of x plus 2. I don't know which one. These are the same, obviously. I don't know which one Connect Math wants. Okay, question 15. We are moving to a topic called factor by grouping. This is when you have 4 terms, and let's go look at them. 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 4 different things that you're adding or subtracting, in this case adding. So there are 4 terms. This should send up a little flag that says to factor by grouping. What does that mean? We are going to group, these 2 factors and these 2 factors together. So let's look at just the first 2 factors. What's the GCF of those 2 factors? Nothing in common but 1, but I see an a cubed and an a squared. So I'm going to pull out an a squared. What's left in that pink grouping? If I pull out an a squared, that becomes a to the 1. So I have 5a plus, okay, I'm going to pull out an a squared. So this goes away. 5a plus 4b. Okay, you see the plus. I'm going to leave that plus there. Plus. Now I'm going to group these 2 terms together and pull out a GCF. The number is still just 1 that's in common. I don't see an a. Ooh, I see a b squared and a b cubed, so I can pull out a b squared. What remains? Oops, I'm going to pull b squared out in red. That's a GCF, b squared. Now, what remains of those orange terms? If I pull out a b squared, I have 5a remaining. Plus, I'm going to pull out a b squared, that 3 turns into a 1, and I have 4b remaining. Okay, I have factored the pink grouping, and I factored that orange grouping. Do you see that I have 2 terms now? This one plus this one. Those 2 terms have a common binomial. 5a plus 4b in pink, 5a plus 4b in orange. I'm going to pull out 5a plus 4b. What remains from those 2 terms? That will be gone. I'm left with a squared plus 5a plus 4b is pulled out. I'm left with b squared. My answer is 5a plus 4b times a squared plus b squared. There was a lot going on there. I have a feeling we're going to get to practice that some more. Question 16, factor by grouping. How do I know that I'm going to need to group? 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 terms. I'm going to go group, which means I'm going to keep this sign here in the middle. I'm going to go group these 2 terms together, factor out a GCF. Then I'm going to group these 2 terms together and factor out a GCF. So for the pink one, what's the GCF between 3p squared and 6p? The biggest number that I can pull out is a 3. I have a p squared and a p, so I can also pull out a p. What's left? If I pull out the 3, that's gone. If I pull out a p, that 2 turns into a 1. So all that remains from this first term when I pull out 3p is p. What about the second term? If I pull out a 3, 3 goes into 6 2 times, and I'm going to pull out the p. So all that remains over here is a 2 plus. All right, now we're going to go do the orange terms. What's the GCF between 4p and 8? Well, I can pull out a 4 from both of those two terms. If I pull out a 4 from this first term, I'm left with just a p. Plus 4 goes into 8 2 times. So if I pull out a 4, I'm left with just 2. Now I have two terms here. I have 3p times p plus 2 plus 4 times p plus 2. I see that both of those terms have a common binomial, p plus 2. If I pull that out, what remains? Well, this one's gone, so all that I have left is a 3p plus, if I pull out the p plus 2, all that remains is a 4. So my answer will be p plus 2 times 3p plus 4. Number 17, factor by grouping. How do I know that I should be using grouping? There's 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So I'm going to group the first 2 together, and then I'm going to group the second 2 together. So I'm going to keep this in mind right here, this negative. All right, for the first 2 terms, what's the GCF of those 2 terms? 3 and 2, the numbers have nothing in common. W squared W, I can factor out a W. If I factor out a W from the first term, I'm left with 3W. If I factor out a W from the second term, I'm left with 2. Okay, this is where it gets a little tricky. Do you see that you have a minus here? If I factor out a negative, that would turn this one into a positive. If I factor out that negative, it turns the sign in here in the parentheses into a positive. So now I have minus. What's my GCF of these 2 terms here in orange? 15 and 10, the GCF is a 5. If I pull out a 5, what remains? 15 divided by 5 is 3, so I have 3W plus 10 divided by 5 is 2, so I have a 2. Hopefully you see a common binomial. What is that common binomial on these 2 terms? It's 3W plus 2. And I have, when I factor that out, I see W minus 5. Number 18. 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. I'm going to group. I notice that I have a minus here, so I know immediately when I do these 2 terms, if I factor that negative out, this turns into a plus. So before I even get started, I'm going to go do that. All right, the first two terms, what's in common? I see a t to the fourth and a t cubed, so I'm going to pull out t cubed. What's left? 4 minus 3 is 1. T cubed is gone, so what's left is 3t plus 4. Okay, then I have minus. Okay, what's the GCF here between 18t and 24? A 6. 6 goes into 18 3 times. 6 goes into 24 4 times. So when I factor out a 6, I'm left with 3t plus 4. Oops. Sorry about that. That jumped on me. I'm left with 3t plus 4. Okay, I have two big terms. This term minus this term. I see that both of those have a 3t plus 4. I'm going to factor out 3t plus 4. That's gone. That's gone. And I'm left with t cubed minus 6. Okay, number 19, factor by grouping. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 terms. Put your pencil down for a minute. Do not work this with me yet. I'm going to show you. Do you see here they say hint, rearrange the terms? If you did not see that, I'm going to show you how you know you have to do that. So keep your pencils down for a second. So far, we've said, okay, put a big plus sign there in the middle. And I'm going to go group these two terms and then these two terms. With the pink two terms, what comes out? Anything? AY, BX. There's nothing in common other than 1. That's how I know I've got to rearrange the terms. So let's go over here to the side. AY plus. Let's go factor, or let's go use one of these two. Do you want to use the BY or the AX? It does not matter. Let's do the BY first. So then they would both have a Y in common, right? Okay, so I did AY plus BY plus BX plus AX. BX plus AX. They're all accounted for. I did not change anything. I just rearranged the terms in a different order. I still have 4 terms. I'm going to factor by grouping, leaving that alone. What does the two pink terms have in common? What do the 2 orange terms have in common? For the pink, my GCF is now Y. If I factor a Y out, I'm left with A plus B. For my orange 2 terms, I have an X in common, so I'm going to, oops, I forgot my blue plus. I'm going to factor out an orange X. I'm left with B plus A. Now be careful, since they are a plus, you know that A plus B is the same as B plus A. So I'm going to write this one as A plus B. Y times A plus B plus X times A plus B. Both of those 2 terms have an A plus B in common. So I'm going to pull out the A plus B. That's gone. That's gone. And I'm left with Y plus X. For question number 20, factor out the GCF first, then factor by grouping. So I'm going to go over to a Word document. We need to factor out the GCF first. So with the numbers 6, 6, 4, and 2, the greatest common factor of all those numbers is a 2. If I pull out a 2, this will turn into a 3. That turns into a 3. This turns into a 2. This turns into a 2. Okay, for the letters, I have an x to the 5th, an x squared, an x to the 4th, and an x to the 1. The highest exponent I can pull out is a 1. So this 5 turns into a 4. This 2 turns into a 1. The 4 turns into a 3. And the x is gone. Okay, this first term does not have a y. So it doesn't matter that these have y's. The first one doesn't. Our GCF is 2x. And what will remain will be 3x to the 4th plus 3xy squared plus 2x cubed y plus 2y cubed. So let's go back over to our homework page. Factor out the GCF. That's what goes here. So we're going to write 2xy. Oops, I'm going to go black. Hold on. 2xy times 3x to the 4th plus 3xy squared plus 2x cubed y plus, one more term, 2y cubed. Okay, part 2 says to factor that by grouping. So you'll notice that they pulled out the 2x. Okay, I'm going to go back up and work here. Oh, where did I get that y? There's no y there. It should be just 2x. Sorry about that. 2x. I can't copy from one sheet to the next. Okay, here we go. Let's go work with their work right here. I'm going to leave that 2x alone. My answer will have a 2x in it. So right now, I just want to focus on 1, 2, 3, 4. Those 4 terms. I'm going to put a big plus here. Okay, from my first 2 terms here, what comes out? What's the GCF? I see a 3, x to the 4th x, x. If I pull out a 3x, 3's gone. The x to the 4th becomes x cubed. If I pull out 3x, 3x. So here on the first 2 pink terms, I have left 3 or x cubed plus y squared. Then I have a plus. Here in orange, the 2 orange terms, I can pull out a 2 and I can pull out a y. If I pull out 2y, y cubed becomes y squared. So I'm left with x cubed plus y squared. I see from those 2 terms a common binomial x cubed plus y squared. So that goes away, that goes away. I have x cubed plus y squared times 3x plus 2y. Now, don't forget about the original GCF, 2x. So your answer is 2x times x cubed plus y squared times 3x plus 2y. Last question, number 21, says to factor out 1/7 from this polynomial. If I pull out 1/7, what remains? So essentially, I'm just pulling out a 7 from a denominator. Well, okay, make that go away. Make that go away. Make that go away. What remains is 3p squared minus 1p. We don't need to write the 1. We can just say minus p minus 3. That's it.